Good Monday morning to you, Dog Nation. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. I want to be careful to make sure we're not too loud over there. Let's make sure we're not popping up there too loud. But good to have you with us as part of our program. Really excited about the week to come. DawgNation Express on Saturday. Still a little bit of time for you to get in there and get a ticket on that. We'll tell you more about that as we get a little bit closer and also throughout the program today. And obviously the big one on Saturday night there in Sanford Stadium, Dooley Field at Sanford Stadium, playing host to the Georgia Bulldogs and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. On today's program, we'll hear from Georgia coach Kirby Smart. We'll hear from Notre Dame coach Brian Kelly. We'll hear from Georgia quarterback Jake Fromm. We'll have a lot of look ahead to what's going to happen against the Irish. And for the Georgia fans who were a little surprised to hear me as outspoken as I was on Saturday about why I don't think this is going to be a close game at all this weekend, a fun atmosphere and a great TV product, but essentially a merciless slaughter by the Dogs to the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. I'm going to try to make my case for that on today's program and give you a chance to decide if you agree or not. Obviously, you don't have to. My only job is to sort of express my opinion as clearly as I possibly can, so I'll do that today. And our buddy John Stinchcomb is going to join us as well. We're really glad to have you with us as DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, begins right now.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
You know, one of the things I really appreciate about you, my audience, the community we've developed here together on DawgNation Daily is I think a lot of you show genuine concern for me. So on Saturday, when we're doing our Pella Window postgame show in the UGA bookstore after the game, and I kind of opened the show by saying that I am of the firm belief that Georgia goes out Saturday and absolutely puts a beat down on Notre Dame. Some of you were a little bit surprised. Some of you were afraid that I was maybe too much of an emotional fever pitch. I might not even make it to Saturday. You know, we got to pace ourselves for a week to get ready for the big game that's coming up. Some of you thought I might be kind of out in front of my skis a little bit as well and just sort of talking too much about what's going to go on. Now, the truth is, if a Georgia coach or Georgia player said this, it would raise an eyebrow. It would probably be problematic. However, my job is to give my opinion, and that is my opinion right now. I have a lot of confidence in this Georgia team, and I have a lot of confidence in my ability to predict what's going to happen next. And what I believe is going to happen next is not going to be pretty for Notre Dame. Now, all I can do is lay out my opinion on this, and you can decide for yourself how much that sort of colors your own opinion and how much of what I say over the course of the next few minutes you find yourself agreeing with. And if you don't, it's one of the reasons why we have our comment sections wide open. It's one of the reasons why I love interacting with you on Twitter at DawgNation Daily. I like hearing the other side of stories, but nonetheless, I think through 3 weeks and through the last couple of years of college football, both for Georgia and Notre Dame included, I think we see a narrative starting to emerge, and that narrative speaks well for UGA this Saturday night against Notre Dame. Now, let me start to make my case this way. I thought that Kirby Smart said something kind of interesting on Saturday that probably gets overlooked just a little bit. That with the big game looming against the Irish, it would have been very easy for some college football programs to maybe not be at their sharpest against a team like Arkansas State, especially given the, for good reason, story outside the boundaries of the game that took place last week. However, for Georgia, that was not the case. Georgia was essentially emotionless in the way it went out and took care of its business against Arkansas State, and that kind of speaks to the focus and determination this team has right now. Here is Kirby Smart on that point after the game on Saturday.
I'm not with the kids 24/7. I'm not on their phones with them. I think they live in a different world nowadays where there's so much information that it's not like you're worried about them being worried about Notre Dame. You're worried about them being worried about everything because they constantly are getting information. It's information overload all the time. So we just try to concentrate on Arkansas State. We talked about them each day, talked about their program and their conference, and try to go out and play them.
And they went out and did that. And while some fans, media alike, are going to say, well, it's just Arkansas State, you can't read too much into that. I think there is maybe a little bit of a misunderstanding about the team that Georgia was playing this past Saturday. Some of you care about the advanced stats and the analytics. Some of you don't. Arkansas State came into this game, though, last week, according to Bill Connolly, ESPN.com, his SP Plus rankings. Arkansas State was the 60th best team in the country. After losing the game to Georgia on Saturday, they essentially only fall to like 75. This is a program that's been in a bowl game for 4 consecutive years. This is not the worst team in America that Georgia beat 55-0 on Saturday, but Georgia, as focused as it was, made Arkansas State essentially look that way. So I think that you can take away some positives for Georgia even against an opponent like Arkansas State, which is not as bad as you might think. I think the Georgia performance there is more than just a bloodletting of a cupcake. I think the Georgia performance is a bit of a foreshadowing. However, the more important stuff for Georgia against Notre Dame is kind of what comes next. Now, as I said before, Kirby Smart can't say any of the stuff I'm about to say. Kirby Smart can't give you any of the details that I'm about to give. He's got to be careful not to do that. But around here, we're going to tell the truth. We're going to tell the truth about Notre Dame. We're going to tell the truth about what is going to happen on Saturday. Kirby Smart, though, giving some compliments, giving a little bit of credit to Notre Dame. First of all, talking about the kinds of players they go after, saying essentially Georgia and Notre Dame are swimming in the same waters when it comes to recruiting. Here's Kirby Smart on that again.
I know the style of play they have because we played them 2 years ago. They recruit the same players we do. So when we go knocking on doors, we all go after the same guys. So they have really good football players.
And listen, in some cases that is true. A guy like Tommy Tremble at tight end, you heard that name come up with Jeff Sintel from time to time. Obviously, Kyle Hamilton is a safety that I think that Georgia would have really liked to have had. So there are going to be certain instances in which Georgia and Notre Dame are recruiting the same kinds of players. But since Kirby Smart has been at Georgia, more and more often that has not been the case, and this is the reason why, or one of the main reasons why I think that Georgia is setting itself up for an easy win on Saturday. Let me give you some numbers to back this up. Remember back in 2017 when these two teams played? Razor-thin margin for error. Mistake on either side could have been the difference in the ball game. This was as close can get when it comes to these two programs. And the kind of recruiting work that had been done in the previous years by the programs was a big reason for that. If you go back and look at 2010, for instance, Georgia number 11 recruiting class in the country. Notre Dame number 15. This is the Brian Kelly era. 2011, Georgia was 7th. Notre Dame was 9th. 2012, Georgia was 9th. Notre Dame was 17th. 2013, Georgia was 12th. Notre Dame was 5th. 2014, Georgia was 8th. Notre Dame was 11th. 2015, Georgia was 6th. Notre Dame was 13th. Then you get to the Kirby Smart era, and that's where things really change. But on September of 2017, these two programs have been traveling similar paths when it came to recruiting. But since Kirby Smart's been in Athens and since Brian Kelly's been at Notre Dame, they have been wildly different recruiting outcomes. Kirby Smart's put together a 6th, a 3rd, a 1st, and a 2nd in terms of national ratings for his recruiting classes, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite Team Ranking. Notre Dame, over those same years, is a 15th, 2 tenths, and a 16th. This is not the same level of talent. Same level of cool-looking uniforms, same level of national prestige, at least in the modern times, maybe so. Big-time TV product, yeah, this is going to look really good on TV. But when you look a little more deeply at the talent on both sides, Notre Dame just simply cannot match what Georgia brings to the table. It's one of the reasons why I think this game is certainly going to be a final score that heavily, heavily favors the Georgia Bulldogs, which have already opened as around a two-touchdown favorite. Now, speaking of that, there's something to be made mention of when it comes to the point spread on this, too. First of all, though, let me let you hear Notre Dame coach Brian Kelly, who clearly has a good bit of respect for the Dogs based on what he said Sunday night as part of a teleconference with the media. Here is Kelly.
Make no mistake about it, they understand the caliber of play that is going to be needed against Georgia. So they're excited about the challenge that's in front of them, and I don't think that they can underestimate the fact that this is a game that they've been excited. They know it. It's been on the schedule and one that they've been waiting for. So they're ready to go.
Ready to go indeed, and as I said before, this one's going to look great on TV because Notre Dame historically is as big a national brand as you can be, and Georgia in recent years has done a pretty good job of building itself into kind of a nouveau riche version of a national brand the last couple of years. It makes for a really good TV product. However, though, with all the prestige that Notre Dame has, when it finds itself in the situation that it's in on Saturday, there has been usually something up with that. There's been usually something worth paying attention to. Notre Dame, according to the folks at OddsShark, has only been a double-digit underdog 5 times in the Brian Kelly era. And a lot of those games have gone about like you might would have thought. As a 10.5-point underdog last season to Clemson, they lost 30-3. As a 17.5-point underdog to USC in 2016, they lost 45-27. As a 10-point underdog to Alabama in the 2012 National Championship game, they lost 42-14. In other words, with Notre Dame, who has a lot of casual fans who follow it and assume that Notre Dame is going to be really good, with all of that understood, if the folks in Vegas or the online sports books still make Notre Dame a double-digit underdog the way they are going to be on Saturday, around a 2-touchdown dog depending on where you're shopping the line at any given moment. For the most part, Notre Dame has not played well in those games under Brian Kelly with good reason. Now, they did win outright as a double-digit underdog against Oklahoma going back to the same year, 2012. But listen, that Oklahoma team then is not the same kind of talent that Georgia's going to put on display on Saturday. The last two recruiting classes for Notre Dame back then in 2012 were the number 12th and number 13th ranked class in the country. Not the same kind of talent that that Notre Dame's going to face on the other sideline against Georgia on Saturday. No, this one looks a lot more like a typical Notre Dame team against the kind of Clemson team that it played a year ago, the kind of Alabama team it played in 2012, the kind of game that the experts kind of went into it thinking would probably not be close, and the end-up final score margin was even worse than they had initially predicted or initially imagined. That's the kind of idea I have in my head for this Saturday as well. Tremendous pageantry and a whole lot of fun and a great commercial for UGA recruiting, but ultimately a dominant, easy win for UGA. Let's let this week go by, and we'll find out and see how that plays out when it indeed does go down. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Hello to you, and thanks for being with us. No matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., DawgNation Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. We're on the radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Rep, and we're available as a podcast wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. Just really glad to have you with us today, and really excited about DawgNation Express coming up this Saturday. It's presented by our friends at Kroger and Pella Window and Door. And there is still an opportunity for you to get involved, although we have just a few of these tickets left. Now, the bus is sold out and been sold out forever, the true DawgNation Express bus. That's sold out, but we still have a few tickets left for the people who will be in Athens and want to be a part of our tailgate. Luxury, all-inclusive tailgate experience presented by Kroger and Pella Window and Door. A chance to watch the game there that night if you don't have tickets, don't want to go into the stadium. But there are only a couple of these tickets left. By today, there's a chance they last till tomorrow morning, but they are about to be completely gone. I don't know exactly what number it is, but it's like, as many as I can count on one hand type situation. So get in there and get those really, really quick if you want to be one of the last ones to get in. DawgNationExpress.com for more details on that. All right, let's also go around the doghouse here today. Speaking of our friends at Pella Window and Door, they bring around the doghouse here to you today. And while I think that Georgia wins easily against Notre Dame on Saturday, that is not to say that I don't think that this is a big-time showcase for college football and for UGA in particular. And the Notre Dame brand obviously helps provide some of that, right? I mean, this is over the course of the last 100 years. If you had to pick the biggest opponent you could possibly play, Notre Dame would be that. Now, the last few years, probably not quite so much anymore. But in terms of what this brand has meant historically, there's obviously a lot of that going on. And when Brian Kelly spoke to the media yesterday, I thought he had a really good way of describing this. Now, this is a challenge for both teams. Notre Dame's played in these kinds of games before, so maybe it makes it a little easier for them. Georgia has now played in a lot of these games. Maybe it makes it a little easier here, too. But the big showcase, ESPN's College Game Day, CBS Primetime, that is certainly something to at least think about. And I love the way that Kelly described this when he spoke to reporters yesterday. Here is the Notre Dame coach again.
It's like being on Broadway. It's a Broadway show. You're on stage every game you play. It's on national TV. They know that all their games are broadcast either on NBC or CBS or ESPN or ABC. So they know they're on that spotlight, and they choose to come to Notre Dame because they want that. They relish that opportunity. So obviously in this game, being on national television, it's why they come to Notre Dame, and they really enjoy it. So they don't see it as pressure; they see it as a privilege, and they enjoy it.
Now, Kirby Smart says the same thing. By the way, speaking of Kirby Smart, you notice that pressure is a privilege line there from the end at Brian Kelly. So these two coaches apparently have the same mind when it comes to stuff like that. And as Kirby Smart said, that listen, the pageantry and the build-up is just part of this. It's actually kind of one of the attractive parts of it. I don't think the coaches want to downplay it too much, but you've got to be careful that it doesn't seep into your game preparation either. And I thought that Kirby on Saturday had something kind of interesting to say in that regard. Let's listen to the Georgia coach again.
Yeah, I think the way you prepare for that is play in it. I mean, there's no preparation. We have a lot of preparation to do to get ready for the game. But as far as the stage, the biggest thing you can do is let your players relax and play. The team that makes the fewest mistakes will usually win that game. the team that overanalyzes it and hypes it up and makes it bigger than it is and larger than life, sometimes that gets you in trouble. We've played in a lot of big games. We got a lot of kids in that team room in our building that have played in big football games, so they're not going to be intimidated by that. But Notre Dame has a very good football program. They've got a really good team, and they've got a coaching staff to do a tremendous job. They're one of the top 4 teams in the country last year, guys, and played Clemson super tight throughout the game. So I got a lot of respect for them and their program, and they do a great job.
I was going to let you hear one more from Brian Kelly, but we'll go ahead and skip that for now, the other Brian Kelly clip, because there's a point I want to make about what Kirby Smart says there. You hear him when he says, hey, the school that overanalyzes it, that tries to make it more than what it is, they may get themselves in trouble. I think it's a pretty strong indication right there. And I know there's been a push from some fans about the idea of UGA wearing black jerseys and let's turn this whole thing into a blackout. I don't think that game needs this. I think that game already has plenty. It's got the CBS platform. It's got the game day broadcast. Georgia fans aren't and probably incapable of being more hyped up than they're already going to be. I don't think you need any of that this Saturday. I think for Kirby Smart, he wants to try to keep what's happening inside his locker room as similar to the previous 3 games as possible, which means no kind of alternate jerseys or anything like that. As a general rule, I'm not necessarily against those as an idea, but I probably think this game probably has enough trappings of its own right now. And as Kelly and Smart both say, it's about how you handle the prestige and the hype that's already in place. It's going to determine who wins this game, not who finds that extra level of motivation to drag out and bring into this contest. But no doubt that'll continue to be kind of a hot topic of conversations. Around the Doghouse, it's presented by our friends at Pella Window and Door. And, Pella Window and Door can help equip your house with energy-efficient windows and doors. Family-owned and operated. You got a branch right here in Georgia. That means you get national power backed by local service, and you can't beat that. Also, you can't beat this deal either. 50% off qualifying installations right now, or 0% APR for 48 months, and this offer is valid through November 14th. So you want to act on this today. A couple of really good ways to get in touch, either online at pellasoutheast.us. That website, once again, pellasoutheast.us, or give them a call at their Dunwoody showroom, 404-445-2979, 404-445-2979. Pella Window and Door of Georgia. They are viewed to be the best. All right, we're going to hear from Jake Fromm later on in our program. We'll look at how he kind of compares to the current Heisman hierarchy presented by Kroger. We'll do all of that. But for now, here on a Monday, let's talk to our buddy John Stinchko.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Boy, a lot to talk to John about, whether it be what's going to happen this Saturday to Notre Dame, which we will get to. Didn't do much on last Saturday's game, though. Let me try to do a couple of those things as well. First of all, John, let me just say good morning. Thanks for being with us on the program today. Really appreciate your time and hope you are, much like us, getting excited about one of the biggest showdowns that Sanford Stadium, Dooley Field at Sanford Stadium, has seen in quite some time. I'm sure you are looking forward to it much the same way we all are.
It's always fun to be on the show, and finally, preseason is over. We're about to kick it off, and I can't wait. It's an exciting week for Dog fans and the players alike. That this date has been circled since they set the calendar, however many years ago, with the home and home against Notre Dame, and with College game day coming to town, it's going to be a fun one.
All right, let me do 2 things on the Arkansas State game before we get to Notre Dame, and I do want to talk about the game day stuff too. Here are the 2 reasons why I take a lot from Georgia-Arkansas State, even though to the naked eye it may seem like an overmatched opponent. One of the things, John, I called for through the entirety of the offseason, especially as we kind of built close to the start of the season, Georgia had to find its playmaking wide receivers, and there was certainly a possibility those playmakers would come from the ranks of the youth, and after 3 games, I would think you'd say that those 2 guys, Dominic Blaylock, George Pickens, are well on track to do that. Now, John, I'll admit I have a tendency to probably hype things up a little too much from time to time. I certainly wear my emotions on my sleeve when it comes to some of these kinds of issues, but I don't think I'm out in front of this one too much for saying that so far I think that Blaylock and Pickens absolutely look the part of what you could have hoped they would have been when they first signed with Georgia and when they, were going to try to work their way in and be a part of the playing rotation here this year. One of the reasons why I think Georgia wins easily Saturday, one of the reasons why I think that Georgia is on the shortest of short lists in terms of competing for the national championship, Pickens and Blaylock for me are a big part of that. What did you see from them this past weekend?
Well, more of the same, especially having not been able to see Dominic against Vandy in week one. Every chance he's gotten, he's exploited and shown why he's deserving of that high billing coming out of high school. Same thing for Pickens. Missed a couple balls, but overall, these guys continue to make huge plays, which is good because Tyler Simmons goes down on a tackle out of bounds in the game, and you've already lost Kyrus Jackson. So, two guys that were returning off a fairly depleted wide receiver group. We needed the young guys to come in and be playmakers, and they have absolutely fit the bill so far.
And I know you and I do the Marlows matchup together every single Thursday night on the DawgNation video channels. By the way, we're looking forward to this Thursday being live at the Marlows and Peachtree Corners for a really fun live edition of our Marlows matchup. But one of the things we talked about on this past week's show was when it comes to the havoc stuff, and gosh knows we've used that word like a gazillion times, probably with good reason, but we've talked about it a lot. The one thing I told you this past Thursday was I wanted to see Georgia, even against what we thought of on paper as kind of an overmatched opponent, I wanted to see Georgia come out there and do for a second consecutive week what it had done against Murray State before, because we didn't see a ton of havoc stuff necessarily week one against Vanderbilt. It got better against the overmatched Murray State. Could Georgia come out and kind of do that again for a second consecutive week? And if so, I was at least going to take something positive from that. Well, John, to my mind, that kind of happened. I don't know what the overall rate ended up being, if they cracked 20% or not, but they had to have been kind of close. There were a lot of PBUs, a couple sacks again, some tackles for loss, and I don't know, John. I felt like for the second consecutive week, this looks like a defense that has a mindset and a mentality, wants to be disruptive in the backfield, and that's another thing that I think is a really bad sign for Notre Dame this Saturday.
I agree with you. I think two things have jumped out so far. One is the depth, the amount of rotation that happens well before the game's in hand, and you're bringing in guys just for experience. The way they're platooning the D-line, the outside linebackers, even cornerbacks and safeties, it just shows how many guys are ready to play. And against bigger opponents, if the fresher you stay, the better you perform in that fourth quarter, as long as you're not sacrificing quality when you bring in that second or third guy. And that's what's really stood out to me is these first 2 weeks, you've got a number of guys that are contributing in a significant way. And there's an identity to this defense that's emerging, and they want to be disruptive. And, I'm sure they're well aware of the emphasis being placed on havoc and stepping up to the call. I think this defense is extremely athletic, probably more so than what we've seen in this Kirby era. There's Roquan Smith. He was elite, and he had some supporting cast. I don't think it was as complete a defense as what Georgia's been able to put together in this 2019 season.
I've got more questions for you coming up, John, but first let me remind folks, we got some great stuff happening at Kroger right now. Pumpkin flavors are back, whether it be pumpkin spice coffee, pumpkin pies, even those pumpkin-scented candles. The fall is here. Obviously, Georgia Notre Dame makes you feel that way, but heading towards those cooler temperatures and the leaves starting to change colors and getting ready for some of those fun fall festivals and Halloween and everything else, well, Kroger's the place to go to kind of get set up for everything you need this fall season, including some of those pumpkin-flavored items like coffee and everything else in between. Make sure you check that out at your local Kroger. All right, I was thinking about you before you joined us on the phone today, and my memory is you certainly had game day for some of your games in, like, say, 2002, but I don't believe ESPN Game Day was in Athens for any of those games. Did you ever have game day in Athens for a John Stinchcomb game? My memory says no. Am I right about that?
You know what, BA? When you play, it's a little bit different because you don't get to participate quite in the festivities as the fans do. So, not to mention, I've taken a number of shots to the head, but as memory serves, I think that's accurate. I think we had 2 or 3 game days, especially junior and senior year under Coach Richt, but I don't think any of them were in Athens.
Yeah,
I could be wrong. I'm sure there's fans out there that know better than I do.
I have taken fewer shots to the head than you have, so my memory may be a little bit better in this regard. You guys had game day for the 0-2 game at South Carolina, for the 0-2 game at Alabama, I believe maybe for the cocktail party that year as well, but I don't remember an Athens day in your tenure. But my question is, what I'm building towards is, as you said before, you're a player, you're getting ready for the game, you're focused on that, but is it the kind of thing that are you watching this in your hotel room the morning when you wake up? I mean, what does the presence of ESPN Game Day on the campus, the site of the game, mean for the players themselves? And it's okay if the answer is it means nothing. But I am curious, though, because of all the hype that fans give that show when it shows up. It's a very big deal for the average fan. Is it a big deal for the players?
I think it's exciting for the players. I remember watching it, especially when it's a game that's pertinent, and even more so when it's featuring you and your opponent. And when you don't play until 7:30 at night, that's a lot of time to fill in that day. And you better believe some of those players are going to be in their rooms watching College Game Day and just seeing Athens in that new light for what a cool experience it is to have College Game Day on campus. And it builds the momentum and energy as you anticipate that raucous crowd when you head into Sanford Stadium.
I wasn't going to ask you about this, but now I'm going to. While we're on the subject of pageantry and things like that, I am of the belief that this is a just say no to black jerseys game. There's been some momentum among some fans of how cool would it be if the team was wearing black? How cool would it be if there was a blackout in the stadium? John, generally speaking, I'm not necessarily against the alternate uniforms. They've been fun before, nor am I superstitious in believing that's the reason that Georgia would lose a game like it did in Alabama in 2008. I don't want to make too much about them one way or another. I just happen to think this game already has enough trappings. Now, you and I are pretty close to the same age, so we may come across as 1,000 years old here if we're sniping against them too much. But to the extent that my platform carries any weight whatsoever, I'm going to use it to say just say no to black jerseys on Saturday. What say you on this all-important matter?
Well, it's the first big game of the 2019 season, and I don't think you need more hype. I love the idea of black jerseys. I think you should probably, before the season starts, circle a game or two where it might be nice to bring a little extra energy and spirit, because that's what it does. It gets fans engaged, and the players like it. I mean, it's fun to have something new and fresh, and put an extra emphasis on a game. You don't need that this week. I mean, it's Georgia Notre Dame in the first big game and College Game Days in town. I would say that I fully hope that black jerseys emerge at some point this season. Maybe down the road, but just not on Saturday of this week.
So let me finish up with this, some thoughts on the actual game between the white lines. I spent about 10 minutes before you joined us trying to make the case because of recruiting, because of Notre Dame's recent history when it's been a big underdog, because of what I've seen from Georgia through 3 games. John, I just don't think this game's going to be close on Saturday. And as cool as it's going to look on TV and as wild as the atmosphere around Athens is going to be, probably for the 48 hours leading up to kickoff at least, the game itself, I think, is going to disappoint a lot of the folks in the country because these two programs right now just exist on different planes. Am I saying that too much? Am I overstating the advantage Georgia has in this game? What do you think happens on Saturday?
Well, I think this. The last time we faced Notre Dame, we had Jake Fromm at quarterback. He was the starter. Now, the difference is that was his first start ever at college football. And was the reserve the previous week, where he just got thrown into action against App State. Now you're looking at a 3-year seasoned veteran who's played in national championship games, SEC championship games, won big games, won the Rose Bowl, all those things, and it's a totally different team. Than what I get it. So Notre Dame has the same thing as well, but just the depth, the maturity. I think the firepower on both sides of the ball for Georgia. There's a reason why I think they belong in the top 3 or 4 teams right now and are destined or should be headed to the national championship this year. I don't think the same thing for Notre Dame. I think they're a quality program, but they're not even close to the level that Georgia is right now. I don't think they have the maturity or the players in place. And I said earlier, not on this show, but I think it's at least a 2-touchdown victory for Georgia on Saturday.
Well, I know there's going to be a lot of talk about it over the course of the next couple days. I can't wait to do a lot of that with you, including this Thursday. We are live starting at 6 p.m. at the Marlowe's Tavern in Peachtree Corners. A couple big things about this. First of all, it's our first Marlowe's Tavern broadcast of the 2019 season. I'm thrilled about that, and also thrilled for the first time to be at the Peachtree Corners location. The address is 5210 Town Center Boulevard. Once again, 5210 Town Center Boulevard, Peachtree Corners. We'll be there from 6 to 8 p.m. coming up this Thursday night, and it's going to be a ton of fun. John, it's just going to be a great week. I can't wait to see everything that plays out on Saturday, and can't wait to talk to you more about it this upcoming Thursday at the Marlowe's location there at Peachtree Corners.
It's going to be a blast. I can't wait to be with the fans on Thursday, and more importantly, watch our dogs take the field on a college game day against the top 10 opponent and show the country what Georgia football is all about.
John, great stuff. Yeah, great stuff. I'll talk to you later on, okay?
Sounds good, B.A. Have a good one.
Good stuff there from John Stinchcomb, the former UGA All-American. Can't wait to see him this Thursday, 6 p.m. for our Marlowe's matchup live broadcast at the Marlowe's Tavern in Peachtree Corners. Once again, 5210 Town Center Boulevard is that address, 5210 Town Center Boulevard in Peachtree Corners. Let me get in the weeds on point spreads for like 2 seconds, and then we're going to talk about a couple of other things before we circle back to Jake Fromm returning to play Notre Dame this upcoming Saturday. Depending on where you're shopping this point spread right now, where you're looking at it, you've seen it either like 12.5 Georgia, 13 Georgia, maybe 14 Georgia in some places. If you're a very close listener or viewer to DawgNation Daily, you'll remember last week we talked about the Westgate, which is kind of like the market-leading sports book in the state of Nevada in a lot of ways. They had the early look-ahead line at 11.5. Now, the difference between a look-ahead line and an actual week-of-the-game line is, typically speaking, sports books are willing to take a lot more money on a bet the week of a game than they are on the look-ahead lines. Those are usually low-limit bets on something along those lines. So when the line for the week of the game opens higher than the look-ahead line was, you typically would take that to believe that whichever direction the line is moving, they're afraid of taking a big bet on that side. So to get way in the weeds on this, the reason why Georgia-Notre Dame doesn't open at 11.5, it opens with Georgia as a higher favorite than that. It sounds like Vegas and some of the online books who follow, in many ways, Vegas's lead, they knew that had they opened it at 11.5, massive action on Georgia early, likely from people who try to be advantage players and try to bring a lot of extra information into the discussion. Another reason why I think the Georgia side is the right side in this game. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of talk and debate this week about just how close it might be, and I'll be looking forward to seeing how Georgia fans weigh in on this in their own regard as well.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
All right, really fun to have John Stinchcomb on DawgNation Daily. I love his expertise, his insight, and he brings a lot of that to our program. And this Thursday for our Marlowe's matchup, that's going to be really fun there as well. And, you know, this week there's going to be a lot of thought about what happened back in 2017 when so many Georgia fans traveled to South Bend. And the experience of being around that many Georgia fans for that week is the kind of thing I'll never forget. But there's just such a spirit of unity and community that's sort of born out of something like that really makes you feel special. Even if Georgia had lost, the weekend itself would have still felt fun and special because of how big the showing was from Georgia fans. The fact that the Dogs won made it even bigger and better. The reason why I bring that up is because many of you can't be in Athens on Saturday. You live in major cities. I hear from people all the time that live in Detroit and New York and San Francisco and smaller towns, Dallas, Houston, not that those are smaller, I'm saying, but kind of all the major cities, every small town in between. I hear from so many of you who are stretched across the country, and you want the experience that we all had in South Bend in 2017, or many people are going to have in Athens here this upcoming Saturday. That's how the UGA Alumni Association can help, because there are more than 80 chapters of the UGA Alumni Association, 324,000 alumni overall, and there are a lot of game-watching parties that you can be a part of, and it's a great way to kind of connect and get to know your local alumni chapter. One of the websites you can go to find out more about this is alumni.uga.edu/game-watching. Now, that's a little bit of a mouthful, and I have a tendency to talk fast, so let me say it again, and I'll say it slow. alumni.uga.edu/game-watching. Now, in addition to game-watching parties, your local UGA alumni chapter is also doing some great things to support the university that you love, and while you're hanging out with those folks, you're going to want to find out more about that there as well. But a great time to get together with other fellow UGA alumni is this upcoming Saturday, and I hope you'll find one near you to be a part of that. Let's do some SEC through stuff here for a moment. Let me start with bad news for Alabama. Now, around here, we don't celebrate injuries. Obviously, we want Georgia to have as many advantages as it can, and injuries are a part of the game, but we don't celebrate any of them. For Alabama, though, they are now dealing with what looks to be potentially another major one to a name you've heard of. Matt Zenitz, AL.com, is reporting that LaBryan Ray has injured his either foot or an ankle. It's kind of a lower foot type deal for LaBryan Ray, the defensive lineman. This to go along with the Dylan Moses injury and the other linebacker that was down before that. They have dealt with a lot of this kind of stuff, and for an Alabama team that has not been perfect on the field yet, you start to wonder how much of that depth is being just thinned out too much on the defensive side of the ball right now. The Ray injury, and we'll find out more about this. I guess there's still some wiggle room in the language of maybe it's not as bad as it initially looks, but we'll keep our eye on this because of LaBryan Ray injury after the transfer portal situation with Antonio Alfano and the Moses injury. This is a potential big development for Alabama that's getting thinner by the day along its defensive side of the ball, and the offense hasn't had it much better because Trey Sanders got hurt and others there too. Speaking of that, right now, I just think that Alabama's an imperfect team. I thought, going on the road to South Carolina, to the naked eye, it looks like an easy win. They did not cover the Vegas point spread in this, though. And once again, Alabama's just not running the football. So, through 3 games, I think you would have to say against, varying degrees of competition, Alabama's probably got more gaping holes left unchecked than Georgia does. Georgia needed to find out something about its wide receiver core. I think it's found out more about that group than Alabama's found out about its running backs. Georgia's got some issues to deal with defensively. We'll see how that translates to some of the bigger and better teams that it plays. But through 3 games, I think Alabama has looked less sharp than Georgia has. I think you can say the same thing about Clemson there as well. From a final score standpoint, it seemed like an easy win for Clemson at Syracuse on Saturday. But once again, Trevor Lawrence is throwing picks. This game had a chance of being way closer than it was. Clemson through 3 games, to me, has not been all that sharp. Although they do have the best win of the 3 we're comparing right now, having won against Texas A&M last Saturday. Ohio State going on the road and demolishing Indiana is actually a pretty good win. That's a place where the Buckeyes have struggled in the past. Pretty good job for doing that as well as they did. One more SEC point I want to kind of get to here for a moment. Did you notice that we now have a situation where obviously Florida wins against Kentucky, Franks gets hurt and what looked to be a very serious injury. Prayers obviously go out to him. Kyle Trask comes in and plays better. Florida fans are celebrating this like it's an SEC championship, which is kind of embarrassing. But more importantly, Trask becomes the latest of a good number of backup quarterbacks who've actually played pretty well around the SEC as of late. Ryan Helinski seems to be a better leader for the South Carolina offense than Jake Bentley was before he got hurt. You had the kid that came in and replaced Tommy Stevens for Mississippi State, although the Bulldogs eventually lost. What this kind of leads me to believe is, for national championship contenders, we would say that almost none of them have a backup quarterback that could keep that team in the national championship conversation. But if you're below that threshold, and by the way, Florida is, if you're below that threshold and you have any kind of issue at quarterback, I think the recent success of some of these backups from the SEC would say, hey, roll the dice and try somebody else, because if your guy's struggling, it's not like things are going to get that much worse. I mean, honestly, I don't think Kyle Trask is as good as some Florida fans seem to think he is. He's a bit of a fan favorite there, but do I think he's going to play dramatically worse than Felipe Franks was? No, I guess I probably don't. I don't think the outlook changes for the Gators all that much. And by the way, let's take a moment to have a chuckle at Georgia Tech, which did lose to the Citadel on Saturday. Ultimately, though, Jeff Collins can probably use this in recruiting more so than it's going to hurt him. I mean, he's got a lot of early playing time to sell because the talent level for the Jackets is not good right now, but obviously a pretty fun moment for a lot of UGA fans, and we'll make that your SEC through. And here on DawgNation Daily every Monday, one of the things we do is take a look at the Heisman hierarchy. It's brought to you by Kroger, and we take a look at how Georgia players, the two leading favorites, for, at least among the Georgia contingent right now, would be quarterback Jake Fromm and running back DeAndre Swift. And in this portion of our program, we take a look to see how they kind of rank and compare to the top contenders for the award. And the good news is, I think both of these guys, Fromm and Swift, are at least still very much in the conversation and have a chance this Saturday against Notre Dame to propel themselves even more. I think it's a credit to Swift that even as much as Georgia's using other running backs, he right now is still finding a way to get his highlights, still finding a way to get his level of production. He looks healthy. I think that DeAndre Swift has a chance to be Georgia's representative in this conversation. I also think Fromm right now is greatly helped by the emergence of a Dominic Blaylock, who statistically was strong on Saturday. George Pickens, who continues to make big catches. Those moments for those freshman wide receivers aid the Fromm campaign right now. But as we said before, it's the big national showcase, big TV audiences. That's one of the things that has always had a history of seemingly swaying Heisman voters. I think it's the Fighting Irish on Saturday, another chance for that. And as Jake Fromm said after the game this past Saturday, he and his team are certainly looking ahead to the Irish now. Here's what Fromm had to say.
I mean, they're going to be a bigger football team. They're going to be more schemed up. They're going to be faster. And, we know that. We're ready to play, somebody our own size and go out and play football.
What's really funny to hear from there is how seasoned and mature he sounds. He's obviously played a lot of football now at Georgia. He's been through so many games like this, Rose Bowl, national championship game, couple of SEC championship games. He has done a lot of that kind of stuff. A far cry from where he was in September of 2017 when he did play well, but admittedly was playing as a starting quarterback for the first time in a very difficult spot at South Bend on the road, also a big TV audience that night, tuning in on NBC. In terms of just how much Fromm has grown and just exactly what Notre Dame will have waiting for it from him on Saturday, well, Kirby Smart talked about that after the Arkansas State game this past weekend, too. Here's Kirby on that point.
So, world of difference. I mean, he was a young, nervous, composed freshman, and now he's a confident, experienced junior. And he continues to get better. He makes good decisions. I thought he moved around in the pocket well today, and they gave him some tough, different looks.
I thought Fromm's numbers on Saturday were really pretty impressive there as well. And my guess is he's going to play well coming up this weekend too. I just think that he has, with no disrespect to the receivers he's had up until this point in Georgia, I think the collection of receivers that Fromm has a chance to throw to right now are just the kind of players that potentially take this UGA passing offense to a different stratosphere than it's been before, which is not to say that Fromm's the only one who deserves that kind of credit for the offensive success when it does occur. But y'all know how this goes. The Heisman, in a lot of ways, is a quarterback's award. Fromm's one of those guys that's been around for a couple of years now. He's got the fame, and he could benefit from that when we get a little bit closer to it truly indeed being Heisman time. But the overall bottom line is, when you look at the Heisman hierarchy that includes guys like Jalen Hurts from Oklahoma, probably Justin Fields from Ohio State, still Tua Tagovailoa from Alabama, given how much the Tide's throwing the football around, DeAndre Swift and Jake Fromm are very much a part of that conversation right now as well. Every Monday, we'll do Heisman Hierarchy presented by Kroger. And, Kroger's got great eats for every game this football season. You can get ready with 12 packs of Coke products, 3 for $11. How about pork spare ribs and 12-pack of Coors and Miller Lite starting at just $17.99 when you use your card. You can shop for all your tailgate and game day watching parties, all of that at your local Kroger. I hope you will check that out. All right, so we'll get ready to wrap things up here. Really excited about the week to come. Just can't wait for everything that goes down for Georgia Notre Dame on Saturday. I've heard from so many of you, and you seem to be as excited as I am about this huge showcase for Dooley Field at Sanford Stadium. It's going to be a ton of fun. Let me remind you one more time, as I said a little earlier in our program, we are about to sell out of all of our remaining DawgNation Express tickets. Now, the bus has been sold out forever, and we've been doing the show now live for almost an hour, so a lot of folks have probably jumped in and taken this. I'm guessing we probably have one or two of those left. DawgNationExpress.com. If you want to be a part of our all-inclusive luxury tailgate, you can hang out and watch the game there that night. It's food, it's beverage. I'll be there. A lot of fun stuff going on with watching a lot of those early games there, too. Can't wait for that. By the way, I was embarrassed by Florida on Saturday. Thought they looked awful, and I thought they over-celebrated a bad win. Let me remind them it's been 1,052 days since they've beaten Georgia as our Gator-Hater updater. We'll see you tomorrow right here on DawgNation Daily. And on video. All right, y'all, I got a little bit of time for some comments. We'll try to do a good little run of these. I do have to go a little early. You know, Connor's not here on Monday. That means I got a little extra work to do. So let me talk to y'all for a little bit. I'm curious about your thoughts about the game. I'm curious if you think I've overstated Georgia's chances of earning a blowout, and black jerseys, game day, guest picker. We can just do the whole 9 yards here. We can do anything you want to do. Let me start on YouTube first. I feel like I've started on Facebook the last couple of times. As I transition over to the comments, I'll also remind you that our R.S. Andrews Cool Down is brought to you by our friends at R.S. Andrews, air, heating, plumbing, electric. You know, we trust R.S. Andrews to play all those positions for us here at Dog Nation, because when you call them, they show up, and they do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. There's no weird surprises. You're just going to feel very, very good about letting them in your house to do that work, and they're going to take good care of you. You're going to get your system, whether it be your water heater, your air conditioning, or everything else in between, back to factory fresh specs. Find them online at rsandrews.com. You know we love Dari and the whole gang over there. You hear Dari with us, by the way, on our R.S. Andrews Go With The Flow on Fridays on the Dog Nation video channels. And trust me, they love football. They love hanging out and just having a good time. And you're going to feel really good about letting them do some important work for you around the house. All right, good comments coming in. Let me start with Big Dog fan who says he was really impressed with Kenny McIntosh. He made a Swift-like move on his touchdown run. Yeah, been saying this for a while. The athleticism that McIntosh is showing is probably more than I expected it to be. And when his time comes to have a bigger spotlight at Georgia, I think he's going to make good with that opportunity. I think you have to feel very impressed with what McIntosh has done thus far. So for sure. Frank Patterson asked about the David Daniel commitment that Georgia got going back to Friday. Yeah, we talked to Jeff about Daniel on Friday's show. Really good-looking safety prospect. So that 2021 class starting to take shape here. Georgia also offered a 2020 safety over the weekend there as well. William Gray says, I hear the Spike Squad is going to pay respect to yeah, this is funny. I saw this on, I think it was on Twitter. They're going to pay respect. Actually, somebody sent it to me. Going to pay respect to Manti Te'o's girlfriend and just leave the front row empty for the beginning of the game. That's really funny. Many of you remember the story back in 2012 when Notre Dame linebacker Manti Te'o, who somehow got more Heisman votes than Jarvis Jones did, when he had the made-up girlfriend. Yes, that's going to be pretty funny. Good stuff there. Ronald Watson says, Ronald's one of our non-UGA fans in our comment section, says that Notre Dame's just going to load the box on Georgia. I mean, Ronald, what you've seen from Georgia the last 3 weeks is loading up that box. That's not as easy to do against UGA as it once was, and not just because of George Pickens and Dominic Blaylock, although that's a pretty good reason not to do that. When you've got James Cook lining up and making an outside threat with jet sweeps or short passes, all of a sudden now you're having to defend the full 53.5 or 53 1/3, however long the width of the field is. You got to defend that full width of the field against Georgia now. You got to defend it wide. You got to defend it deep. So loading that box, which is what Notre Dame did last year to Georgia and had great success. I don't think you can play that same game plan against Georgia anymore. It's actually a pretty good point, but through 3 games, I think that Georgia's showing it's got reasons to show you why you can't just go out there and put a big nose guard straight over the center like you used to could, and maybe control some of Georgia's stuff between the tackles running the football. That's not as easy to do against UGA as it used to be. Chiming Dog says we need to set up for the pregame show in Section 0. There's no telling. Is that the Coke thing at game day? Yeah, maybe we can get a Dog Nation Daily sign there for game day. I'd certainly be proud to see that. Lacey Miller says Pickens will be the key player versus Notre Dame. Y'all watch this too. I think that Brian Kelly, when it comes to Pickens, is going to try to work the refs a little bit, because one of the things that Pickens does really well is he uses his body. You saw this a lot on Saturday. It's almost like what you see from some NFL receivers where they like to come back to the football. It's sprint, body turn, and come back to the ball. And that's just the way that it's almost like a basketball move. Pickens likes to post up on defensive backs. I could see Kelly trying to work the refs a little bit and look for any kind of contact that Pickens might draw. There's going to be some natural bumping that goes on in any situation like this. But Pickens uses his body well. His physicality is one of his best weapons as a wide receiver. That's one of those things that I do think the Notre Dame coaching staff is going to be probably looking pretty closely here. Thomas Van Santa reminding us that Georgia had 6 sacks against Notre Dame back in 2017. I didn't realize it was that much, but I remember certainly Davin Bellamy and Lorenzo Carter getting in there on that. Randall Scott Peterson says, "Can anyone cover Blaylock?" They mentioned this on the ESPN late night scoreboard show about how one of the things that Georgia's been missing. Blaylock catches that 5-yard out and he just turns on the jets and takes off. That's what you need. Easy throw that turns into a huge gain because of the athleticism of the wide receiver. That's what Blaylock brought to the table right now. Big Country says Louisville ran the ball pretty well in Notre Dame. They did. Kelly has talked a lot this weekend about trying to get better there in that regard. And, I got thoughts and prayers. Listen, thoughts and prayers if you're having a hard time stopping the run against the 3 teams that Notre Dame has played thus far, because Georgia's going to send those running backs out there in waves. Brian Kephart mentioning Matt Landers, who had a chance to come up with a big Fromm throw on Saturday. Difficult for me to tell if it was a perfect throw, probably a ball that could have been caught. Some people were a little bit disappointed that Landers only kind of got the one arm on it, one hand on it, as opposed to kind of a two-handed, almost leaping effort, which obviously Pickens had made the week before. So, yeah, I kind of understand where that's coming from a little bit. I do. Let me go over to Facebook here for a little bit. We got a few minutes left. We can do some comments, and I got to get off the air after that. Somebody said the coaches are doing a good job managing the playing time. Who said that? Yeah, Keith Finney, you're right. Keith, the way that this Georgia coaching staff is subbing guys in and out right now on both sides of the ball, I think is pretty impressive. I think that's a pretty good thing to be able to see, and I think you're going to see a lot more of that against Notre Dame on Saturday, because I do think they want fresh pass rushers in the game. Some people have been asking about Nolan Smith a little bit going back to Saturday. Some of the key moments belong to other guys. Nolan was in, maybe not as much as some people expected. I think you're going to see a pretty heavy rotation with a lot of those guys on both sides of the ball, running backs included. I was also thinking about Zamir a little bit. We haven't probably seen as much of him yet as we would expected. Now, we've seen a lot of guys. Haven't seen as much yet from Zamir as we would have expected. Does he get a bigger opportunity this upcoming Saturday as part of that substitution rotation? Chase Smith on the Notre Dame rushing. Yeah, I just think that's a rushing defense he's mentioning. I think that's a real problem, and I don't know how you necessarily get way better on that. Now, we have seen some teams undersized with defensive lines have some success against Georgia. I'll go back and cite 2017. I guarantee you film that Notre Dame will watch this week will be South Carolina from 2017 and Missouri from 2017. 2 first halves in which Georgia did not have great success rushing the football against defensive lines that weren't necessarily stopping every team that they play. It seems somehow, and I'm not an X's and O's expert, but somehow, those 2 teams had some success there against Georgia that day. That's where Kirby started using that keep chopping. Remember that phrase that was such a big part of the vernacular in 2017? A lot of the keep chopping language was born out of, Georgia's slow to get started with its running game against both South Carolina and Missouri in home games in 2017. I would also guess another film that Notre Dame watches a lot this week is the LSU game a year ago, because, I thought that Dave Aranda, the LSU defensive coordinator, won that chess match against Jim Chaney, won the chess match against Jake Fromm. Somehow they were showing a look at the line of scrimmage that was convincing Georgia not to run the football, and that obviously turned into a disastrous game plan. LSU's just got better talent. As I said before, this comes down to last 4 years. Kirby Smart's been at Georgia for 4 years. His recruiting classes, 6-3, 1-2. Notre Dame's 15, 10, 10, and 16. That's, come on. What else do you want other than that? An average of about a number 13 class against the average of about a number 2 or number 3 class. Georgia's a big favorite for a reason. Matt Rukavina says, when McIntosh broke off his touchdown, my wife said, this is pretty funny. Matt says his wife, when she saw Kenny McIntosh score that touchdown, she got mad at the screen, said, "Come on, Georgia, put in your backups. This is bad sportsmanship to be running your starters out there like that." Now that's pretty funny for McIntosh, who I'm reckoning would count as your number 5 running back right now, which is obviously an embarrassment of riches. I'm really happy with what I've seen with Georgia through 3 games, and I don't, you played one FCS opponent, which is of little count. Arkansas State, they rank right now in the SP Plus ahead of Georgia Tech, and I'm not saying that to be funny. I'm being serious. They rank ahead of a team like, say, Boston College. They rank ahead of UCLA. This is not Little Sisters of the Poor necessarily. Jeremy Lloyd says Goldberg for speaker Saturday. I don't know if you mean guest picker for game day or if you mean one of the things I really like is the pre-recorded it's Saturday in Athens thing they do right before the team runs out. It was Elle Duncan. Elle's someone that lived in Atlanta for a long time. I know Elle pretty well. Glad to see her having so much success at ESPN. She did that for Saturday. Maria Taylor's done it. Dooley did it last week. I thought it was really good. So Goldberg to do that would be actually a nice touch. Has Goldberg been guest picker for ESPN Game Day before? I don't know that he has. They may want to do somebody different. Jarvis Hanna, though, says that Goldberg will be the guest picker. You may be right about that. You may be right. I think that Goldberg would be a good one. He's doing like a Stegmania commercial in the stadium right now, and he's just, he's a professional wrestler. He's just good on camera, just really good. Al Chandler says Nature Boy. Y'all know I love Flair, but Flair's done so much of this stuff now. I know he's got an authentic tie to Georgia, but he's like a Rams fan and a Panthers fan and a 49ers fan. He's kind of been for every team. So I don't know that he's exclusive enough to be a Georgia guy here. Tavares Taylor talking about the talent Georgia has now compared to what went there in 2017. Yeah, Tavares, I think it's a good point that Georgia Notre Dame in 2017 was a close game against 2 programs that had been closely aligned and how they'd been built. They were both top 10-ish recruiting programs. It's not the same thing anymore. It's just not. It's just not. Tavares also brings up Champ Bailey to be guest picker. That would not surprise me at all. Bailey, the newly minted Pro Football Hall of Famer. I think that Georgia probably likes that too because, a lot of folks, while they may be too young to remember Bailey as a player, late 90s, there's a whole generation of people that's old for now. But having just seen Bailey go into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, his name's in the news. If you're concerned about this being a commercial for Georgia, Bailey being out there on the field before the game, Bailey being on game day is a pretty good commercial. That's a pretty good commercial. Antonio Dunn also thinks it's going to be Bailey. You may not have a better name out there than that right now because that's going to be more universally, like you bring out like the celebrity, like a Luke Bryan, somebody like that I know is a pretty big Georgia fan. Not everyone likes Luke Bryan, and even though he's a world-renowned act, he's on American Idol, not everyone even knows who he is. Same thing with like a Ryan Seacrest. Seacrest is about as famous as you can be, but when it comes to like celebrity status, these celebrities kind of exist within their own silo from time to time, but the largest number of people in that stadium, possibly, especially the recruits, they're going to have a pretty good idea of who Champ Bailey is. Derek Tillman said, "Did I ever meet Goldberg?" Not since he became a pro wrestler. I may have met him when I was a kid and he was a player because I used to, go to picture day and stuff like that. But as a pro wrestler, I don't believe I've met Goldberg. I know I went to high school with the WWE superstar AJ Styles, and I haven't seen him in a while, but I used to know him really well. But I don't believe I've met Goldberg, although it'd be an honor. It'd be an honor. Dark Brooks says it took BA to say it. I wonder what it was that I said. Kyle Crawford says bring Roquan Smith back to be the guest picker. I think we're still only like week 3 in the NFL, so you're not going to have a whole lot of bye weeks. I want to say Carolina might have a bye, but I don't think you have a ton of bye weeks right now. Sharonda Taylor says that Bailey would be a good guest picker. Tavares also mentioning Quavo. Has Quavo done the guest picker thing before? I'm not sure about that. Maurice Carter says Hines Ward would be awesome. Yeah, Hines is working now. He works for the Jets, so I don't know that he could get over there and do that in time. Philip Jordan Wells is also horrified that I said 1998 is old generation. I got news for you. The kids that are graduating high school this year were born in 2001, I want to say. So that's bad news. Bad news. Here's a good question. Does Corso put on the dog head? So does Notre Dame have – they don't have headgear, right? They've got like the little hat the Irish dude wears, but I don't think they have a big headgear thing, do they? So you may get the dog headgear from him just because I don't think that Notre Dame has any other headgear. And, most Georgia fans, Connor Riley brought this up last week, that in 2013, Georgia fans were cheering for Corso not to put on the dog head. But you may get that this time because I don't think they have any headgear for Notre Dame to wear. And I think he's done like the dress like a leprechaun and dance around type thing before. But I'm guessing you don't get that here. Gerald Harmon also mentioning Omari Hardwick from Power. That'd be an interesting name, I guess, to consider for that. Oh, yeah, Kibo Weir said, anybody catch who came out of the banner on Saturday? So I tried to score this one myself after kind of a cluster of Georgia players last Saturday. This particular Saturday, all by himself, is Tyreek Stevenson. He was near the front last week. He was the front this week. I believe you can say that McCole Harmon's job, the baton has now been passed to freshman defensive back Tyreek Stevenson. I'm sure he'll do the honor well. Dapper Dan says, let Goldberg spear Corso. That'd be a sight to see. Will says, when is I'm assuming he means the UGA press conference. We're like 50 minutes away from that, Will. And we'll probably have it up here on the DawgNation YouTube page, probably at 12:30 or so, 1 o'clock. So check back on DawgNation on YouTube. And if you haven't subscribed to the DawgNation YouTube page, you need to make sure you do that. Cliff Payne says a lot of folks picked Notre Dame last time, if I recall correctly. It didn't work out for them. Yeah, Cliff, it's amazing how different things felt back in 2017 when, Notre Dame had been a 4-win team the previous year. Georgia had only been an 8-win team. This almost seemed like kind of like a cute game between, almost inter-regional game that was kind of a triviality that was even being played. Now Georgia's got a lot more business to take care of, and just the whole feeling around the program is different. Now Notre Dame would say they've also played much better since that 2017 game. I believe they've only lost 3 times since they lost Georgia, but I think when it comes to an overall talent acquisition standpoint, Georgia's just traveling in a different stratosphere. Josh McMillan says, do you think that Nakobe Dean gets more playing time on Saturday? I think, Josh, the thing to remember about that is that right now you're seeing a pretty good push from the 2018 signees. Now, I would have assumed at the beginning of the year that was going to happen, and then I kind of got myself talked out of that because of how much there was seemingly building up momentum for Nakobe Dean. Quay Walker got a sack on Saturday. Channing Tindall was around the quarterback again, once again too. Right now, your starter at that spot that you might have thought was a little bit vulnerable before the season started, Tay Crowder. He was really active again. Obviously, Monty Rice is going to be valuable because of his ability to stop the run. So right now, what you're seeing is a little bit more of what I would have expected when we first started talking about this kind of stuff, that the overall depth at the inside linebacker position for Georgia was going to make it hard for a freshman. Now, we've been given every indication that Nakobe Dean may not be the typical true freshman inside linebacker. But right now, I think what you see is the depth around Dean is asserting itself pretty well. Andrew Hughes says, how about me as the guest pick? If asked, I will serve. That'd be an honor. If asked, I will serve. Joe Brummel says, what time is the Kirby Smart Presser? Should get going here in about 45 minutes. And then we'll have it on the DawgNation YouTube page probably about an hour or so from now. So if you want to check it at DawgNation YouTube about an hour from now, you should be able to get that. P. Brown Live Fit says Quay Walker looks good. He does. He really does. Paul White says, who do you think is going to have the biggest impact on Saturday? So for those of you who say I haven't been giving enough credit to James Cook, here's where that changes. And some of you say, I don't want you on that bandwagon now if you're not going to hop on it until week 4. But what I mean by this is Notre Dame knows it has to sell out to stop the run. You just have to. And they know that's also a problem for them too. So they're thinking schematically about that all week long. One of the reasons why I think they're in some real trouble on Saturday is because if you sell out too much, and if you throw enough bodies at a problem, you can usually solve that one problem, but you cost yourself another issue. So I think Saturday is a day that belongs in a lot of ways to James Cook, what he can do in the perimeter. It belongs in a lot of ways to more of Pickens and Blaylock. And I'll throw Cajun into that too. It belongs to those guys. Saturday is a day where Notre Dame's going to have to make a choice. The first choice they're going to make is to try to take away those inside runs from Georgia, because you're going to get beat by 100 points if you don't. So they're going to take that away first. At that point in time, that's when the true creativity of Coley, I believe, is going to show up. And I think what you'll see from Georgia is not a duplication of the inexplicable game plan that was put on display last year against LSU, where even the average fan, myself included, would look at that and say, what is going on here? This just doesn't seem destined to succeed. I think you see a very different version of the Georgia offense on Saturday. Dapper Dan says Crowder is not giving his playing time away. Yeah, right now, Dapper, he's certainly playing that way. From a talent standpoint, the younger guys may have a step on him, but as of right now, Tay Crowder, which he's been doing the entire time he's been at Georgia, changing positions and fighting and clawing and scratching for everything he can get, more of the same from Tay Crowder. TM says he sees 200-plus rushing yards even with the box being stacked. Yeah, I think you're probably right about that, TM. I do. I think you're probably right about that. Big Country says, how do you think our linebackers are going to do with this Notre Dame quarterback that likes to take off if he sees the lane? Well, I think one of the things that you've seen from Georgia going back to last Saturday, which I think is kind of an interesting development, is the pressure from Georgia is not just coming from the from the guys on the outside, because a lot of times, this outside pressure against these mobile quarterbacks, they can notice that and they can kind of step into the pressure, and which makes them dangerous. But it's a lot harder to read that interior pressure. If you watch NFL games on Sunday, you see a lot of interior pressure. You see a lot of linebackers splitting gaps between linemen, and the offensive lineman's forced to make a choice. And if he's engaged with a defensive lineman, sometimes his lack of quickness won't allow him to then disengage from that and pick up a blitzing linebacker. NFL teams seem to really use interior pressure very well. I think going back this past Saturday, it looked like Georgia was using a lot of interior pressure pretty well. The Walker sack comes to mind here on this. And so for Ian Book, who I do have some respect for, this is a much better quarterback than Brandon Wimbush, the quarterback that Georgia played back in 2017. Book's an upgrade there. I do think that, carefully disguised pressure, not every down or anything like that, but just well-placed moments of pressure, some of it coming from up the middle. I think that's one of the things that Book's going to have to deal with. The other thing, and I'm trying to make this quick, I was watching this streaming video show that those guys from the SEC Network, Tom Hart and Jordan Rogers and Cole Kubelik, do every Saturday night. I was watching that just Sunday morning, just kind of killing some time. And Cole Kubelik said something interesting on that broadcast. He said that when they talked to Kirby Smart, that Smart said one of the things they tried to do against Alabama in the SEC championship game was they wanted to make sure they jammed the receivers at the line of scrimmage. Alabama's obviously got really good receivers. And that Georgia said the first thing we want to do is we don't know if we can run with them step for step. I'm extrapolating now, but I'm assuming. He says we don't know if we're going to run with them step for step. We're going to make them know what's hitting them at the line of scrimmage. And I think you see some more of that. There's a reason why Georgia has recruited all these big defensive backs. And I think that Georgia tries to use its size at defensive back a little bit against the Notre Dame receivers a little bit on Saturday too, which if you're playing, hopscotch to an ACC schedule, you're just not seeing that level of big defensive backs who can run. You're just not. Cliff Payne also mentions Tyler Clark, who has looked like 2017 Tyler Clark a little bit this year. I think you're right about that. I think you are right about that. Chris Stasiak says, is Ringo going to be in town on Saturday? That's a good question, Chris. I know that you can go to the forum at forum.dawgnation.com. Jeff's got a visitors list he's putting in place. I think he's going to publish that at DawgNation.com too. So you can keep up with a lot of that there at Jeff. And I would say there's probably a very good chance that Ringo's going to be there. I just don't remember, but Jeff will have the full list for you. Will on Georgia Tech losing to a bad Citadel team. Yeah. Boy, they had 0-2 coming into that game, having lost to Elon. And who was the other one? Towson. Ooh, that's not good. Not good. Brady Pest Management says, Chris Stasiak, thanks for your service. So Chris is checking in from Afghanistan. Chris, that's amazing. Chris, thank you so much for your service. I really appreciate that. I don't know if you know Green Soldier or not, another one of our YouTube commenters who's recently returned from a tour of duty in Afghanistan. But, Chris, it means a ton to me that you would check in and watch the show. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. And Breda, thanks for letting us know about that there as well. Our friends over at Breda Pest Management, for sure. That's awesome. Where else are we gonna go here? Where else are we gonna go? Let me go back to Facebook just for 1 second. We got to get off the air because I got stuff I got to do, y'all. I apologize. Lonnie Floyd says, how do you think the defensive line is holding up? I would say so far so good. I mean, Arkansas State couldn't run it at all. I think that was actually surprising to Kirby Smart. I think he thought they would run it better than they did. You don't take a ton from that. Bigger challenge coming up this week against Notre Dame. But so far, when you've got Jordan eating space the way that he does, you've got Tyler Clark as kind of a more athletic, kind of three technique guy stepping behind him. Also, don't lose sight of this. I don't know, and I hesitate to use this phrasing because I don't have any backstory on this, but if Malik Herring had been in like the doghouse with Kirby or something like that, apparently that's over with because Herring started on Saturday, and Herring's one of your most athletic defensive linemen, so having him on the field is pretty important. Chandler Johnson says Devontae White is balling, and I would probably agree with that too. So this group right now, one of the other defensive line, wide receiver, and actually just those two. Defensive line, wide receiver are the two biggest issues on paper for Georgia before the season began, and both those groups look a lot deeper right now than we probably once thought they might. Curtis Strickland brings up a good point. Really good showing from the UGA fans in pink on Saturday. I loved being able to support that in honor of the Anderson family. Different stories hit you in different ways, and Blake Anderson's story has moved me. Obviously I know as a guy with a wife and two young kids, I know how pivotal a role that my wife plays in our family, and many of you could say the same thing. To think the Andersons are now having to learn how to live life without Wendy it's harrowing. It's the kind of thing that no one should have to go through, and yet they are going through it courageously. I take a lot of inspiration from them, and I was proud to be able to support them on Saturday and proud to see so many Georgia fans doing the same thing. All right, y'all. We got to go. I apologize. I would love to talk all day long because I'm really excited about this game, but I've got to roll. Before I do, though, let me remind you to check out my friends at ajc.com to get your Atlanta news now. Falcons, great win last night. By the way, we're talking about this today, 1 p.m. on AJC Falcons News Now. Come on by and see us for that. I'm really excited about that. That's the Falcons AJC Facebook page. You can check that out. You can also get coverage of the game at ajc.com. You had Music Midtown this past weekend. You can find out more about that. So some really good stuff there. Also some update on some stuff going on with Georgia 400 too, which is important to me because that's the road I drive every single day. So you can get a lot of your Atlanta news now, all your Atlanta news now at ajc.com. Check in throughout the day to make sure you stay in the know. R.S. Andrews, thanks for making the R.S. Andrews cool down possible. Air, heating, plumbing, electric. $99 Smiley tune-up. It's going to be 90-plus degrees again here today. That means you want it to be cold inside your house. R.S. Andrews can help make sure that remains the case. Check them out online at rsandrews.com. Y'all have a great day. I'll see you back here tomorrow, 10 a.m. for DawgNation Daily once again. We'll look forward to talking to you then.